Hey everybody, welcome back to Readers of the War Game. Today we're going to tackle our next lore-based list, and it's honestly one that I've wanted to do since I really started playing 40k. And honestly, I was actually really disappointed with the tabletop, and it delayed my tabletop gameplay for probably a year because I couldn't actually build this list easily. And it's taken me several years of learning the tabletop and playing the tabletop to kind of figure out how I could pull this off. And that is going to be a list based on the Gaunt's Ghosts, Dan Abnett's brainchild that brought me into 40k. It's been a lot of fun to create this list. It has been very hard. I've redone this list probably 9 or 10 times, and I've had to pull from the entire breadth of the Gaunt's Ghosts series to actually make this possible. So let's dive into this and talk about all of the stuff that went into this work. So, first, why did I choose the Tanith First? There's a lot of different guard regiments that I could do, but, well, and there's also several that are more popular on the tabletop to play. It would have been an easier attempt, especially if I chose, like, the Siege of Vrax and with the Krieg. But I've always wanted to put Gaunt's Ghosts on the table and play them like you do in the books. I wanted to maybe not have hero hammer, which is a term where the heroes or a Space Marine plays like a Space Marine does in lore, but I've wanted to actually get the ghosts involved. I wanted to see them running around the tabletop and doing something similar, because the ghosts actually will play closer to the tabletop Astra Militarum than a lot of other factions will from their novels. A lot of ghosts die. A lot of ghosts are constantly dying in the stories, and very few of them live throughout the entire series. It would easily be reflected in how it would work, because you would have a very infantry-heavy unit that would play very differently than a lot of Astra Militarum you see on the tabletop and in tournaments. So let's talk a little bit about the Tanith First, so we can get a little background in their history as well as their style, so you'll understand why I did what I did, and it'll be a lot clearer as to why it was so hard to figure out how to build them. So the Tanith First are, by the current books, a kind of survivors unit. The Tanith First were a unit that were raised during the Sabbath Crusades in order to give Colonel-Commissar Ibram Gaunt a proper command, and in order to supplement the units that were being sent into that fight. There's a lot that goes into the story, especially in the book The Founding. Well, First and Only is the first story in that collection, but in that entire collection you get to really see who they are and where they came from. So I'm not going to dive too far into that. I would encourage you to read those books. But they're a unit, a company that was supposed to have 3 companies in it, but 2 of them were lost when Chaos attacked Tanith, right as they were launching. And Ibram Gaunt was only able to get away with 1 company, and that's the Tanith First. They quickly become known as the Tanith First and Only, because they are the only unit that will ever be raised from Tanith. It has been completely lost. And since then, they've gone through the fight and actually have managed to raise additional units from hives and planets that they've either saved or have been joined with, because there's 2 units that had just been shattered throughout some fights, and they just stuck them together. And they've become a very hodgepodge unit from a lot of different planets, but they still operate under one pretty simple principle. They are light scout infantry. They are the unit that moves through the forest or holds remote positions and does it with almost artistic ease, to the point where it actually annoys a lot of other Imperial Guard commanders, because they're able to do things that armor and heavy weapons can't. We get to see this a lot in several different stories. The Siege of Irvenhive is one of the first ones where the ghosts become immensely important to the entire protection of that hive itself, because they're able to move quickly, and things like their camo-cloaks allow them to hide in debris and work as snipers that harass everyone that's attacking, and aren't easily removed from their positions because they can't easily be targeted. So a couple of the key things we look for with the ghosts in order to play them on the tabletop is their abilities to potentially scout, stealth, and a lot of their units are very talented ranged units. They have specialty snipers led by Helene Larkin, who are some of the best marksmen in the Imperial Guard. They're known for that, and they're used that way. You also have McCall, who is one of the best scouts and is trained in some very unique tracking methods, and is able to take his scouts into places where they should not be and acquire intel or sabotage, almost equivalent to some Navy SEAL level stuff. And because of that, they are incredibly valuable to the war effort, but because they don't fight in the traditional fashion, everyone kind of hates them. Very similar to how the Raven Guard is viewed by a lot of Space Marines. It's very, very common that they are treated in pretty similar fashions because they do a lot of the same work for the two different units. Honestly, if Dan ever sees this, that's a story I'd love to see. Do a team up between the Gaunt's Ghost, the Tanith First, and the Raven Guard. That would be some sneaky level special forces stuff that I would absolutely love to read. I think it'd be really, really fun to see for sure. So you've got those kind of specialty units, but on top of that, they are still an infantry heavy unit. They do have heavy weapons, they do have flamers, they do have command teams. So there's a lot of different things you can add to this to kind of fill the ranks, because they don't really have armor. I had to go through and decide whether I was going to add any type of transport or armor, and in the end, I felt like the ghosts just... There's only one point in the entire series that I remember them actually being transported by anything besides gunships, where they're just dropped in left. And I didn't want to put a gunship on here because currently 10th edition hates any type of aircraft. So I had to leave them off. But it was a lot of work to try and get to 2,000 points while still respecting the lore. And honestly, in order to do it, I had to get a little creative, because there's some other people who are added to certain books that have some involvement and can be added. For example, Bryn Milo is kind of a psyker, but he doesn't use it in a combat fashion. He uses it in a almost morale sense, where he can sense what's going on and anticipate things and takes action in order to protect people and help them out. But he actually goes on a journey with Saint Sabbat later and is only present for the first, I think, 4 or 5 books in the series. But in order to include him, I did actually put a regimental Primaris Psyker in here to represent him. Honestly, if you're going to do it, I would third-party proxy it and get a kid with bagpipes. You do that, it will be awesome. So if you can get a miniature bagpiper and use that as your regimental psyker, or as your Primaris Psyker, you got the win there for sure. On top of that, there's also a couple times that Inquisitors become involved with Gaunt's Ghosts, whether it be on some of the special missions they're sent on, or when one Inquisitor who's on the ship with them suspects Bryn Milo is a Psyker, and they have to kind of keep it hidden. And in the end, she actually ends up teaming up with them. So I did include an Inquisitor and Inquisitorial Henchman just to kind of spice it up a little bit and give a little bit more variety. Plus, because infantry is very, very cheap in Imperial Guard, I was running out of units that I could probably stack in there. So let's dive into this list a little bit deeper and talk about what it took for me to actually represent these troops as a whole. So I've got my list over here to the left. It's the same list that'll be linked in the description below. You can check that out in detail, as well as I did a just general cost list based on Amazon versus Warhammer.com. And so you can get a actual just cost estimate on what it would take to make this happen. This is the first list that I've done that I would absolutely recommend third-party stuff as well. And if you have a 3D printer, which I do just off screen here, it would be good to 3D print a lot of these as well. You do have to keep in mind that doesn't make it tournament ineligible depending on how much 3D printing you do. But you're going to have to be a little bit creative here, because these units do not exist even closely to what they'd look like. There are ways to make it decent. In the lore, especially the later books, their unit build is roughly Cadian minus the helmets. So their body, you would paint it all black and gray to represent their unit colors. But they do have some Cadian-style body armor that they wear underneath their camo-cloaks. Some of the older guys still wear that little bit more Celtic dress uniform that you see as well. So it'd probably be a mix of that. But if you're wanting to make it tournament legal, you could use Cadians as the base and then swap out heads and camo-cloaks. You'd have to do the Celtic heads to make them look proper. And then 3D print or purchase camo-cloaks as well. And by doing that, it is still legal. Plus, you could do some additional long lasses or get the Tanith, very unique Tanith las rifles that are carried, as well as their long knives or straight silver that are carried by every single member of the Tanith First. And by doing that, I think you could pull this off by using actual legal stuff. So let's talk about it. So the first and obvious choice is the Warlord, and that would be Gaunt's Gross. You got to put Ibram Gaunt in charge, or it would just be weird. And while they play as a separate unit, which I'm actually not a fan of, I kind of wish the Gaunt's Ghost box was treated kind of like the Exalted Sorcerer for Thousand Suns, where you end up with 6 unique units, or 6 unique characters that can be played throughout your army. It would make more sense that way. You can't really do that. They have to play together, and they move as a team, but you can still make it work. So I would definitely make that my opener. And then I would add an additional commissar. So for this, we are pulling from the later books with Commissar Ludd to make that possible. If you really want to, I actually put 2 commissars in here. And I just blanked on the junior commissar's name. I can't believe I did that. I just finished this book like 3 months ago. But you have the commissar and junior commissar that are brought in after it's decided that Gaunt needs an independent commissar to keep track, because he can't both be the commander and the commissar for a unit. Then I would follow it up with 2 platoon command squads. This would give you enough unique units that you would have everyone covered. You always have a Vox operator in the stories. You always have at least 1 medic, sometimes 2. You'd have a standard bearer, and you'd have the rest to fill it out to give it a little bit more. I believe there's a sniper in there as well. But that combination of 2 boxes will give you the 2 units you need to properly maintain all of the characters you need to kind of fill in the stories. Then, like I said earlier, I'd make a Bryn Milo Primaris Psyker. This would be the place where I would have to kind of bend the 3D printing lines a little bit. If you needed to, you could use a Primaris Psyker. It would just be weird because there aren't any female Psykers that show up in Gaunt's Ghosts. And honestly, if you had a bagpiper and you had everything else painted like 40k, I have a feeling that you could probably get away with it, even in a tournament. You could just say, hey, this is Bryn Milo. I had to 3D print because there's nothing close to this in GW. But I have a normal Primaris Psyker here painted ready to go if that's not okay. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if they said okay to it. That would probably be the one place you'd have to stretch a little bit more. There are other Primaris Psykers as well that do show up. There's one that just showed up in the book that released about 6 months ago. And I apologize, I forget what the book's name was. And that battle psyker does show up in the story and is a fairly integral part of actually saving Gaunt's life by directing his team there. You can do a lot of other things like that to kind of bend the story a little bit. And unfortunately, you're going to have to bend the story a decent amount to fit enough of these characters in there throughout to kind of get them in there. And like I said, I did include an Inquisitor, but the Inquisitor is not in the story at the same time as the Commissars, or this next character is the regimental preacher. They pick him up during their during their fight for the actual Tomb of Sabbath. And he becomes a big integral part in the later stories. So I would absolutely include him. Honestly, he's one of the characters that I think needs to be in there the most, along with that second Commissar, Commissar Ludd. He's in there for the second half of that story stretch too. I don't know if they appear in the same book. I think they're one book after each other. But both of those characters become integral to the story from the time they enter on. Now, in order to get some of the Tanith feel, we're going to have to get a little creative with how we do things. So, in order to get the Scout Regiment feel, the only units that kind of have that same feel in the Imperial Guard are the Kachdan Jungle Fighters. They have some very unique abilities that somewhat mirror what I'd expect from a Tanith Scouts. So, I would suggest 3 units of 5 of the Kachdan Jungle Fighters. Once again, you'll have to do a little tweaking. Luckily, the Tanith Scouts do very much have a similar feel to the Kachdans in appearance, just with a repaint and a camo-cloak added. It won't be a huge stretch to make them work. Now, I would love to see Tanith Scouts as an actual playable unit someday, so I hope GW actually does that. You also can do the Tanith Snipers to replace the Rattling Snipers, who aren't very popular in gameplay because they don't really fit. They look a little weird. They were fun back in the older editions, but because everything has both been increased in quality, they've also fleshed out the units a lot more. So the Rattlings don't really fit with any of the units, but Tanith Scouts and Tanith Snipers are very frequently loaned out to other units. A single squad regularly gets sent to go help different units throughout the Sabbath Crusades. So having those as playable units would make a lot of sense, both economically, because you'll probably sell a lot of them, but it also makes sense in lore. But like I just said, after the Kachdan Jungle Fighters, I would also include the Rattling Snipers. Once again, I do 3 boxes of those, so you get 3 squads of 5. You can have to do a little judging there as well. But I think with some 3D printed parts, you could make it at least work, as well as some head swaps. Now, like I said, the core of the Tanith, while the Scouts and the Snipers are the units for that company, the bulk are just core infantry with a little bit more stealth ability. They have unique abilities to track and to hunt as well, but they are very, very good at holding the line. They're not as good with trench work, but they're very good in things like urban combat, where it's shoot and move, or in field and advanced type stuff. They are also very successful at holding fortified positions. So I would represent these with just 6 infantry squads. Get 6 Cadian infantries, do head swaps, and put stealth cloaks on them. Call it a day. Those are easy. I would do 6 boxes of those just so that you have enough. I probably wouldn't run them as 6 separate squads. I'd probably run them as 3 in bulk, just to make sure you have some brick shooting, so that your scouts and your snipers can move around the board and do a bunch of things, along with the Inquisitor and the Inquisitorial Henchmen. I'd also pair the Commissars here, as well as the Regimental Preacher, with these 3 squads, so that you can get those buffs. Next, you have heavy weapon squads. Heavy weapons are actually fairly common in the Tanith First. They initially were started with Dragon Bragg and his cohort, but you see them laced throughout, whether it be mortar teams, heavy lasgun teams. You see them a lot. So I would have at least 3 heavy weapon squads in there. It also gives you a little bit better anti-tank abilities, as well as some heavier fire compared to just the line infantry, because you're going to need that if you're playing this list. And unfortunately, that's really all you've got when it comes to the heavier stuff. You're just going to have to do death by 1,000 shots is kind of how you're going to have to win, or work on positioning and board control so that you can win by points, which honestly is what Tanith does a lot. The Tanith First in lore are very good at taking and holding positions away from the enemy and limiting their ability to actually take it. And oftentimes, once they're locked in and in cover, they are extremely dangerous because they're hard to hit and they can hit you super, super easily. And I think this list will allow that. The last 2 on the list I've already mentioned is the Inquisitor and the Inquisitorial Henchman. This just gives you a few extra abilities that you don't really have, kind of like the heavy weapon squads, to deal with tanks or with specialty units that can't be dealt with by the infantry. And with this takes you to the full 2,000 points. Like I said, the list will be included below, as well as a link to the spreadsheet with the cost breakdowns of every single one of these I've done, as well as a couple others that are going to be coming here soon. And those were also a lot of fun to do research-wise to try and make them work. So now this video has been a little bit long because I've had a lot of fun talking about the Tanith First. So let's talk about cost breakdowns really fast, and then we'll wrap this up. Now, if you go with Games Workshop's website, this is probably the 2nd most expensive army we've had. Yes. 2nd most expensive army we've had to build. The White Scars at full retail beat out the Tanith First by about $100. Tanith First would be, by GW prices, $1,407.28 to get all of the existing units. Now, that is a little bit of a stretch to do, but it also does account for things like the stealth cloaks. To do that, I had to go to Etsy to find those. There were some actually pretty good ones that would work very well for guardsmen and were actually in the Tanith style, as well as head swaps to the Celtic style. The Tanith First are known for having a black beret with the Tanith First symbol on it and their straight silver knives. To do that, it was going to cost about $20 per, and you're going to need a lot of them. That accounts for about $330 worth of that cost. You're getting it through Etsy. So once again, if you have a 3D printer, that'll save you a lot of money. Also, that did not account for the Bryn Milo swap. This just includes the legal regimental preacher. Now, if you go and look for them on the value sites, unfortunately, guard units don't actually drop that much in price. Weirdly enough, that kind of surprised me. It only saves you about $70 to go through Wargame Portal or Amazon to get cheaper. There are also not a lot of fluffy units to kind of do like we've been doing in the last ones, where we've looked back to the Horus Heresy series to steal units, make them look nicer. Unfortunately, the guard units in the 30k universe look nothing like the Tanith First. So the only way you can do a fluffier unit is to go non-tournament legal and look at 3D printing options. There are a lot of them. We currently have a small 1,000 point Tanith First that was entirely 3D printed that we use as kind of a guard fodder for narrative campaigns here in-house. So there isn't really any price savings there, since you're going to be basically buying the exact same lot through discount retailers. Now, if you think I missed anything or there's any units that should have been included here, let me know down in the comments below. And also, if you have a unit that you would like to see, just like the Dark Angel a couple weeks ago, let me know in the comments below as well, and I will prioritize those. I've had a lot of fun doing these list builds, and I hope somebody has tested them out. If they have, let me know in the comments below, and please send pictures either here or Instagram or on X or wherever you can find me. I'm also on Threads and TikTok as well. I would love to see these actually built and on the tabletop. I haven't actually had a chance to do them in detail. Like I said, we have just kind of a 3D printed one. It is unpainted and primed right now. It's just gray. I do hope to eventually get to those, but I have a lot of other stuff coming. I also have the Dark Angels that is in work right now, but nowhere near done. So make sure you send those to me if you have them. I would love to see them. Or if you just want to send me pictures of your 40k armies as well that you've done, if they're lore-based or not, I love to see them. I love to see really good painting. Honestly, it's half of what I do on social media when I'm bored. I scroll and look at all of the cool paint work being done by all of you. So make sure you like and subscribe. We have a lot of really fun stuff coming over the next few weeks. And I'm not going to plug anything yet because I'm not sure which video is going to be next when I'm recording this. But we do have 2 more armies we're going to talk about, as well as some book reviews that I'm going to be slipping in here as well, and a few other fun videos. So if you have any book suggestions or video suggestions that you'd like to see me cover, also please let me know in the comments below, and make sure you ring that little bell so you get notified anytime we have videos upcoming. And I will see you guys next time.